catch that.
I was like, what was that?
All right, you're good. Come on in, bud.
And then on my other side, right here, we've got this. This is called a haversack. This is essentially a Civil War soldier's lunchbox. This would hold anything that he needs to carry when he's going on those long marches. And then finally we have our bayonet. I can't pull it out all the way, but this bayonet would affix to the end of your musket, mainly used for a scare tactic, but if you ran out of powder, you could also use it as well.
So they were pretty stylish back then, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Now, with the clothes, they had some pretty cool weapons, too. So, Robin, would you like to talk about what we're going to use today?
Hi everyone, I'm Robin. I'm also an intern here in the Black Powder program. So what I have here is called an 1861 .58 caliber Springfield musket. These were created in Springfield, Massachusetts. And as you can see, this is what we all have. The parts of this, you've got your lock that has all the mechanisms in this. You've got your stock, which is the wood, and you've got your barrel here. And with this, you have a gun. This is the main parts of it. But without that, you're going to have your barrel sliding all over the place, which would make a pretty bad soldier, right? So we have barrel bands here. This is upper, middle, and low. Upper, middle, and low. We can take these all the way off and put them back on to hold it here. So in our lock, you have your hammer. As just mentioned, we have percussion caps here. They look like Lincoln's top hat. It has mercury fulminate in it that creates that spark. So we place this on the cone here that's in this hammer. Pull that hammer all the way back, pull that trigger, slams down on that little percussion cap and fires the gun. It creates that spark that leads to that black powder. So, aside from that, we also have this metal piece here. Is called a ramrod. We use this while we load our muskets. You will see this whenever we go into the range and go through loading 9 and go through loading 9.
And the way they held them could have been very strenuous, very easy, or very cumbersome. So right now she's at order arms. That's the one you say, when you come to attention, you're bringing the butt of the musket to the right of your foot, level with the tip of your toe. And if I want to bring her to a marching position, so I say, shoulder, arms. She's going to bring that musket up. The trigger guard right here that's guarding the trigger, you're going to hold all 10 pounds of that with your index finger. All 10 pounds for hours marching if you have a bad commander. If you have a good commander, which I will be today, they're going to go to right shoulder, shift, arms. So this allows you to hold your musket up on your shoulder, balance the weight over your shoulder, tuck it into your chest, level with your rib cage. You want the hammer facing away from you so it's not digging into your neck as you're walking or running, whatever your commander up your right hand. So you have it over here, put it into the nook of your elbow. It frees up your right hand to salute. And they did salute with the hands out. It wasn't until later on, and like towards the Spanish America, where we started doing today's modern salute. So that's manual of arms, the basic. There is one that we're not going to demonstrate. It's called secure, but I'm going to mention it. And that is just to bring the muzzle pointed at the ground so that you don't get water in it. So if it's raining, the commanding officer would put them in secure arms. So that means everything inside the barrel won't rust. The locking mechanism is tucked up under the armpit, so you're not getting the lock wet, so you can always have that not corroded, not rusting, so it's fireable. Shoulder, arms. Order, arms. One step backwards, march.
Are you guys ready to see them fire?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That didn't sound very...
All right, folks, we're going to do loading 9 times. So as Courtney previously mentioned, is 9 steps. Now we'll conduct them through it the first time, and we'll explain each step as we go through. So right now we've got shoulder arm. Loading 9 times. Go. We'll take that muscle. So, handle, cartridge. Reach in, pick out one of those favorite cartridges. That's a little tag on it, bring it to their mouth. A requirement of a Civil War soldier was you had to have a bottom and top tooth and tear that cartridge to expose the black powder. Tear, cartridge. They did that, they expose the cartridge. Intact teeth. Charge, cartridge. Pouring that black powder down the barrel. Hammer ready to take it out. Draw, hammer. Hammer, cartridge. Pushing that black barrel, historically, we would push that bullet to the back of the barrel. Then we return to the fire. Return, hammer. Now, I don't know if all of you saw that. They used their pinky to return the hammer back into its firearms, these cartridge boxes can hold up to 40 rounds. If you fired 39 of those rounds, you have a hot barrel. There's no way to let this cool down just by swabbing it. So if you put a bullet in there and it goes off, you lose your pinky, you can still fire a musket without a pinky. And if you have your whole hand above it, you can't fire a musket without these hands. So the pinky is sacrificial. Prime. Bringing it up, giving it above their cap pouch to get and allow easy access to those little brass top hats that they were mentioning during the program. We're going to put it onto the cone of the musket. Now, all of these next commands we all know. Ready, aim, fire, recover, arm, arm. Recover, arms, shoulder, arms, up now, base, present, arms. Give a round of applause for your demonstration today.
Tucked into the dunes. Behind the sandy beaches are rolling dunes, wind-blown sand stabilized by pioneer plants, the first plants able to take hold in this tough environment. Once pioneer plants anchor roots in the sand, other plants follow. Dunes shelter plants from direct salt spray and help reduce the energy of storm waves. Dunes are a harsh environment. A surprising number of plants live on the dunes. Plants like sea rocket and beach elder colonize the open beach. Animal droppings and decaying plants enrich the sandy soil, enabling plants like conradina and beach rosemary to grow. Sea oats that dominate and anchor the dunes are a grass. Their extensive root system forms a web, stabilizing the loose sand. If a sea oat is buried by sand, it develops underground stems that grow to the surface, producing a new plant. These important grasses are protected statewide.
That musket up to their gap pouch, bring it above it so they can put one of those brass top hats on top of the cone. Ready! So we all know the next commands. Aim, fire, recover, arm.
At the beginning of all the conflict, 1860, the war has not yet broken out. South Carolina secedes. The third state to secede was where we're sitting right now, Florida. Florida seceded from the Union, and it joined South Carolina and started the formation of the Confederate States of America. But the forts in this area were still owned by the United States of America. So the commander of the forts, his name was Adam J. Slemmer. Here's an image of him. He took whatever men he thought would remain loyal to the Union, which only numbered about 81 men. So he took 80 men to man this fort. So he left Fort McCree, Fort Barrancas, and Vance Redoubt. Those are the other three brick and mortar forts in this area. He came all the way over here, and he garrisoned this fort with only 81 men. It's very secluded. It's hard to get anything out here. They had no fresh food, but they did have plenty of fresh water at the beginning of his besiegement. Is what he considered. He considered himself under siege as soon as he got here. So he took measures to try to extenuate their food stuffs and their water reserves. So he took whatever he could find at the other forts, brought it over here. He destroyed what he couldn't bring. He spiked the cannon. So the guns over there, they had 100 guns at each of the forts. He took a nail, went to the back of the cannon, hammered that nail through the vent. The vent is very important because that's how you fire the cannon. So if you have a nail in it, you can't fire the cannon. So they had to either rip out the whole vent plug and replace it, which is very costly and very hard to find replacement parts, or they had to try to just get rid of the whole cannon and bring in a new one. So he is where he stalled any attack that could come to try to take this fort from the Union, because the Florida militia immediately seized everything around us. So this was Union. The reason I'm wearing blue in front of you today, everything around us was Confederate while we were Union. So we were surrounded by the enemy 100% of the time. In the first 2 years of the war, 1861, 1862. Combat did not really start here till September 1861, where Zouaves, so a Zouave uniform is a little bit different than this, and it's normally worn by the volunteers. They had what was called pantaloons almost. They look like pantaloons. They're bright red with a vest with a lot of gold braiding and buttons, a cone-shaped hat with a flat brim and a feather going out the back. They were very showy. And they actually instituted that into the American Register for uniforms because they wanted to entice the young men to join the military because they were very showy uniforms. And they were successful. One of those regiments was called the 6th New York Volunteers. They were brought off the streets of New York, trained for about a month, came down on boats, and then they were deposited on the island. And then because they were volunteers, they were not even allowed to stay inside the fort. They had to go camping outside the fort at what is today the campgrounds. They named it Camp Brown, and they were very vulnerable. They did dig a trench and earthworks around their fort. They did put some sharpened stakes and barricades, but they were still being trained. They did not know to set up picket lines and maybe set up some watches. So they, in 1861, after September, they went over and burned down a ship that the Confederate was building, and they thought they were untouchable because they were on a secluded island. And October 9th, 1861, a month after the raid that burned down that ship, 1,000 Confederate troops landed at a place called Four Ponds. As you drove in this morning, if you looked on the right side of the road, there was a bunch of ponds on the north side of the island. That's where the Confederates landed. It's about 4 miles away. They formed up into their orderly ranks and began marching this way, and they attacked Camp Brown, which is only about a mile away from where we're currently sitting. They were taken by surprise. The Zouaves were taken by surprise. They ran away from the camp. Some of them even left their weapons. All their personal items remained behind. Some of them didn't have their uniform jackets on. They came to right out here, this sally port, the entrance to the fort. They came out to here and asked for assistance in driving the Confederates back off the island. Now, the second in command of the fort back then, after Slemmer, was Mr. Major Israel Vages. Now, Major Israel Vages, he is an artillery commander, not an infantry commander, but he was immediately put in command of an infantry unit. He was actually also a math professor at West Point. So after teaching class one day, he received the orders coming down the chain of command that you were going to help quell the rebellion in the panhandle of Florida. He's a math professor, probably wasn't expecting to get those orders, but he took up the call, went down here, came down here, and immediately, after probably about a month of being down here, he took part in the Battle of Santa Rosa Island. Now, Major Israel Vages, he took a couple companies. One was from Maine, one was from Indiana. He formed them up into the ranks, reorganized the Zouaves, gave weapons to the ones who did not have their weapons, and re-engaged the Confederates at Camp Brown while they were burning it down. The Battle of Santa Rosa Island really was picked up in full gusto at that moment. There was an exchange of gunfire. A man by the name of Peter Diason, he was an escaped slave who was seeking asylum here. He watched the battle occur from these east-facing ramparts over here on top of the fort. And all he saw, it was nighttime, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, all he saw was the flash of the musket barrels going off. And the cries of men is all he heard. So he's seeing this battle unfold, and the men out in the field are firing at only what they see, which is just the flash of the muskets. They don't have night vision goggles like we have today. They didn't have torches. They didn't want to give away their position. So all they saw was the flash of muskets, and that's what they were aiming at. At one point, the Union was pushed up against the Gulf of Mexico, and they resolved to hand-to-hand combat to push the Confederates back into the dunes. And then they eventually pushed them back to their barges and then back off the island. So both sides declared victory because both sides achieved their mission goal. The Confederates came over to burn down Camp Brown in recompense for burning down the ship they were trying to build. The Union declared victory because they successfully pushed the Confederates back off the island. So it was a horrific victory, meaning that neither side gained or lost anything in particular, other than lives. About 100 casualties were on either side, casualties being KIA or wounded. So there was 100 people affected on either side. One of those men was captured on the Union side, and that man was Major Israel Vages. He was very new to this area. He grew up in the northern forest, the deciduous forests of Massachusetts and Pennsylvania, and was teaching at West Point. He was separated from his troops during the battle and was taken prisoner and brought over to the Navy base and was held there. And in 1862, he was transferred, in a prisoner transfer, and was reassigned to the American X Corps, which went on to do service in South Carolina and helped quell the rebellion in that state of South Carolina, the first one to secede. So he did some service here in Florida, but then went up north and did some service in South Carolina. So he did great and good things here and up there. But he was a prisoner of war at this Battle of Santa Rosa Island. But both sides used weapons very similar. So I mentioned the 18, for those of you who just joined, this is an 1853 Enfield rifle made in England. It's an imported weapon. So it comes from a northern borough in north of London called Enfield. And the counterpart to this is the Springfield, which is used by the United States Union side predominantly, and was made in Springfield, Massachusetts. But both weapons require the same type of loading technique, calling loading 9 times. Loading 9 times is just as simple as the name entails, 9 steps. At a position of tension, you start, go to shoulder arms, and then your commander officer is going to say, loading 9 times, load. Take the musket, put it in between your feet, which are at a 45-degree angle. You're going to take your right hand, smack your cartridge box. So in this cartridge box can hold up to 40 rounds. And here today I have 4, 2 for this morning and 2 for this afternoon if you want to come back and see me do this all over again. This is what a cartridge looks like. It's a little paper tube with a tag on top. Now historically, it'd be a little bit taller than this because the bullet would already be inside here. So when I tear off the top and pour it down, the black powder would go down first. The bullet would be upside down. So when it would go in, it would be the right ways up with the black powder beneath it, ready to be fired after I've ran it home. So this is what a cartridge looks like. And this is very important because without it, you can't shoot the musket. So I smack my cartridge box, and my next command I'll be waiting for is handle cartridge. I'm going to take out that cartridge I showed you, the tag on top, I'm going to put it in between my teeth. The next command will be tear cartridge. Tear off the top of that cartridge, exposing the black powder to the air. Bring the exposed black powder to the edge of the muzzle. It's a very important requirement of a Civil War soldier. You have to have at least one bottom and a top tooth because you need to tear that cartridge. So you have the black powder ready to be poured down the barrel, and the command to do that is charge cartridge. And pour that black powder down the barrel. You can either put the paper in or toss it to the side. Loosen the ramrod in its sheath, and the next command would be draw rammer. Bring the tulip in. So this end of the ramrod is called the tulip. You're going to bring it to the edge of the muzzle, and at the command of ram cartridge, you'll run it all the way down, pushing that black powder and historically that bullet to the very back of the barrel, so there's a tight fit. So bring it back out, flip it around, and right here you're going to return it with return rammer. Notice I always use my pinky. So this holds up to 40 rounds. Unlike the cannons we have out here, they can dip a sponge into a bucket of water, swab down the barrel, cooling it down before they put the next explosive round in there. These, we have to let them air cool. So if you have fired this 39 times repetitively, it's very hot. And you're not going to tell the Confederate pause, my musket's cooling. You're going to try to take every precaution to not have it prematurely fired. And if it does, you're going to try to cut down as much collateral damage to yourself as possible. So if I was returning with my index finger, and it goes off, that 40th round goes off, there goes those fingers. If I return it with my pinky, there goes my pinky, but I can still fire a musket without my pinky, so the pinky is sacrificial. So that's why we return the ramrod with the pinky. So at this point, I'm going to step back, I'm going to face it down this way. I'm going to drop my hand to the middle barrel band and drop my hand to the side. And I'm going to wait for command from the commanding officer of prime. So I'm going to face this way for it. I'm going to step back, create an upside down T with my feet, so the left heel of my left foot is going into the arch of my right foot, bringing my musket over my cap pouch. And in this cap pouch is our percussion caps. Now you can put as much black powder and as many bullets in this gun as you want, but you cannot fire it without these guys. Now it looks like a little brass top hat. It looks like Casimir's hat over there. And on the top of that little top hat is something called fulminated mercury. And that is actually what allows this gun to be fired. It goes onto what is the cone right there. So when that hammer comes down, creates a spark that travels down that hollow cone, igniting that black powder, firing the musket. So without this, you cannot fire this gun. I'm going to pass this around. I need it back when you guys are done. Downrange. So today, when you guys hear the command of ready, if you have sensitive hearing, or if you have children with you, Miss June here, I want you to cover your ears, because it will get a little bit loud after that, because we all know the last commands of aim, Fire, bang, gun goes off. Recover, arms, shoulder, arms. Right, face, order, arms. And that is loading 9 times, okay? Miss June, do you want to help me?
You want to help?
No, you a little shy?
Can I hold your hand?
I have some of my place.
Now I'm going to show you what a rank of soldiers would have looked like.
Yeah.
If they were
I still need to
standing
get the
super
black
close to one
powder.
another. Would you hold this for me, ma'am?
Okay, you can.
Would you like to assist me as well?
The gun I have is modern
Sir?
ones, honey. It's,
Oh, come on. I'm not scary. I do look scary, but I'm not scary.
What's the name of it?
Would you like to?
Zola.
Hosely. There you go. Alrighty, so would you please stand right next to her for me? And you face the audience.
Turn around and.
You both are wearing blue, so you appropriately addressed. Are standing close to each other? Back then, a rank of soldiers, we were using outdated tactics with modern weaponry. These were rifled muskets, making them very accurate. Max range about 1,000 yards. So they were standing in ranks. Go ahead and go to a shoulder order arm. So you go on to your right foot level with the right tip of your toes. They were standing this close together. They were touching elbows. And they would march in ranks into battle within 500 yards of each other and then exchange gunfire with weaponry that was accurate for its time. So there was Napoleonic tactics with modern weaponry. 30 years prior, we had smoothbores. Mexican-American War, max range 70 yards. 30 years later, max range 1,000 yards, just because rifling. Can anybody tell me what rifling is? I usually get this hand motion. So it's a spiral groove cut from the back of the barrel that spirals all the way to the muzzle. So it's very important because it causes that bullet to start to spin. Did everyone throw a football before? It's kind of football season, right? So you throw a football, you want to get a perfect spiral. That spiral splits the air ahead of the projectile, causing it to fly further and much more accurately. Same principle with the bullets in these guns. So we're at loading 9 times. So you're going to hear the command of loading 9 times, load. You're going to take the musket ahead of you guys, spin it around, and put it in between your feet. All right? You're going to take your right hand, smack your hip. Good job. And the next command is going to be handle, cartridge. You're going to take that cartridge out, put it in between your teeth. And you got some teeth, right? You got some teeth? Smile for me. So you're going to tear that with a tear cartridge. You're going to tear it, spit it to the side. Can you make that noise? Bring the exposed black powder to the edge of the muzzle, right there. Yes, sir. Charge, cartridge. You're going to pour that black powder down, toss the paper to the side. Pretend you have a ramrod. You're going to loosen it in its sheath. Draw, rammer. You're going to bring it around. Ram, cartridge. Put it all the way down. You want to get a tight seal on that black powder and that bullet. Bring it back out. Now remember, we're only using our pinky. So return, rammer. Prime. Now we're going to point up to the sky here. So we don't want to point the muzzles at anybody. So we're going to point it to high to the sky. Go back to half cock. There you go. Upside down T. Perfect. You remembered. Someone was listening. And then you're going to take a cap, put it onto that cone. And the command of ready, go to full cock, aim, fire, bang, gun goes off. You say bang? You say bang? No? Okay. We had a misfire. The gun didn't go off. Recover, arms. Shoulder, arms. Order, arms. Thank you for your help. Everyone give them.
Time, load. Handle, cartridge. Tear, cartridge. Charge, cartridge. Draw, rammer. Ram, cartridge. Return, rammer. Prime. Ready. Aim. Fire. Misfire. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That was a misfire. These guns are actually not
That one is a real deal.
so there could have been a breach in the actual cone, or there could have been something blocking it.
See, I have done misfires without the powder. No gun I have.
Yeah.
And it sounds just like that.
It would have been a lot louder.
Yeah. Tried to make my own powder, but it didn't work. It's not grained enough.
Ready.
Wow.
Load it, load it, Will, load it. All right, folks, thank you for joining me today. Thank you again for coming.
Who's overseeing multiple cannon. When that officer is ready, they might point to you and they're going to yell, "Fire!" That's when you pull on the cord. Go ahead and pull. And what do you think happens then? It shoots. The cannon goes boom! Fire and smoke and gases come flaming out of that bore. This cast iron tube comes railing back. The room fills up with smoke. And your ears go numb. You'll hear ringing, most likely. But immediately afterwards, you'll come and start reloading this gun. It's a long, lengthy process. Because of how heavy everything is, it's going to take a lot of energy to load and fire this type of gun. See that? There's a big hole in Fort Pickens. What, you see that gap? That is a hole in this fort. The same year that Battery Pensacola was completed, there's an accidental fire that erupted in the north wall, which is where we were just hanging out. The fire grew towards that missing section where 8,000 pounds of explosives was stored. The explosives set off, shattering that northwest corner of Fort Pickens. So this fort has undergone extensive use, and for over 150 years, it was a part of a mission to protect the American coast. Some benches here. Standing on what is called Tower Bastion. Again, a bastion is one of those parts of the defense that break out and away from the main walls to help protect those walls if they were to be attacked. We have, in many regards, the same view from here that Adam Slemmer would have had with Tower Bastion when he was here in January 1861. If he were to look off to the south, he would see the Gulf of Mexico. If he were to look off to the west, he would see Pensacola Pass and beyond, what we call today Perdido Key, but he would have seen the masonry fort of Fort McGree, which no longer stands today. Still standing today, he could have seen Pensacola Lighthouse, which had begun operating in 1859. He could also see Fort Barrancas. If you look at below us, you see the two-story white houses. The second house from the right, if you guide your eyes up to the chimneys, and then just left, set into the tree line on the mainland, you could see the earthen rampart of Fort Barrancas. And then further down at the end of this land opposite of us, you would have had the U.S. Navy Yard. Of course, all of that space, which today we call the Naval Air Station Pensacola, all of that space after January 12, 1861, for Adam Slemmer, was enemy territory. And he, here, was considered the enemy to the state militia from Florida and Alabama over on that land. But it's going to be on the 15th of January when maybe peace could be secured here in this area. Two officers came over to Fort Pickens to discuss surrender terms with Adam Slemmer. Adam took a fellow officer, a close friend with him named Jeremiah Gilman. So it's Adam and Jeremiah who go out and meet with one man whose name was Ebenezer and another man whose name was William. The William that Adam would be talking to, we already learned about. William Chase, when Florida seceded from the Union, would be made the commanding officer of the Florida State Militia. It's under Chase's leadership that Fort McGree and Fort Barrancas and Advanced Redoubt in the U.S. Navy Yard were seized by state militia. And recall that this is a man who had been born in the North. This is a man who had been educated at West Point, who had taken an oath to serve as an officer in the U.S. military, and who had given over 40 years of his life to that nation. But it's going to be in 1861 when he chose to side with the future Confederacy. And he would make the attempt to have Fort Pickens taken.
Santa Rosa Island, which occurred right out here at the campgrounds. Any of you camping today? Besides this gentleman? All right, that's where the Battle of Santa Rosa Island took place, and that's where the old Camp Brown used to be. So let's go back a couple hundred years, 1860. 1860, we had, all this was owned by the United States of America. So what does the U.S. on my belt stand for?
United States of America.
United States. And I have an eagle on my chest emblem that shows that I am part of the United States. I'm a United States Army soldier. And it's holding an olive branch and some arrows. We're not afraid to make peace. I mean, we want to make peace. We will seek peace, but we're not afraid to make war. So in 1860, there was a lot of strife in the United States of America. The southern states were fighting against the northern states in the White House, in the Congress. Politically, they were fighting back and forth, going back and forth. In 1861, the first shots of the Civil War broke out in what is Charleston, South Carolina, Fort Sumter, what is now Fort Sumter National Monument.